Welcome to today's deep dive. So I want you to imagine a swarm of rogue, silent drones flying into restricted airspace.
Right.
And instead of firing a single missile or scrambling jets, the military they just turn off their ability to move forward.
Exactly. They don't jam a signal. They literally alter the local laws of physics, so these drones hit an invisible wall made of space-time itself.
Which is just wild. And that is exactly what we are looking at today. We're getting into a densely theoretical but highly applied paper detailing the Dylan curvature framework and something called the geodesic shield.
Yeah, the mission for this deep dive is to unpack how treating spacetime as a programmable variable completely revolutionizes things. I mean, everything from quantum data security to stopping those autonomous drone swarms.
But to get there, we kind of have to throw out the basic physics we all learned in high school, right?
Yeah.
Like, we are usually taught that fundamental constants say the speed of light are absolute limits everywhere.
Right.
But this framework treats them more like a local volume dial that you can actively adjust.
That is a great analogy. I mean, for over a century, engineering has relied on the assumption that those physical rules are fixed everywhere. It's what's known as global Lorentz invariance.
Okay, right.
But the Dylan framework abandons that entirely for something called curvature variable physics, or CVP. So instead of accepting a fixed background, it uses a localized curvature field to actually change the speed of information and energy deterministically.
Sort of like bending the geometry of a room.
Exactly like that. You bend the space so that a signal traveling across it naturally takes exactly the amount of time you want it to. You create an isolated environment with zero latency because you physically dictate the space the data travels through.
Wow. Okay, but if we literally have our hands on the volume dial of space-time, how does the geodesic shield actually use that to enforce order? Because, the universe naturally leans toward chaos and entropy.
Well, it fights that chaos using a dual-scale integrity stack. So at the macro level, it uses what they call omega calculus.
Omega calculus. Sounds intense.
Yeah, without getting bogged down in the complex math, just think of this as a continuous atmospheric pressure that forces the entire system into unified order. They call this syntropy drift.
Syntropy drift.
Right. It's literally engineering the exact opposite of entropy. And then down at the micro level, you have the CVP spin overlay.
Okay, what does that do?
So if a single subatomic anomaly pops up, say a rogue bit of cosmic radiation, tries to flip a piece of data, this overlay acts as a micro-integrity gatekeeper. It instantly prunes it out before it can cascade.
Wait, it instantly prunes anything unexpected?
Yeah, immediately.
It sounds like playing an online video game where the server forces your character back to the starting point if you try to glitch through a wall.
That is pretty much it.
Except this server is reality. But wait. If it triggers a localized mathematical collapse over a single bit deviation, doesn't that make the system incredibly fragile?
Yeah.
I mean, what if that anomaly is actually a perfectly valid but highly unusual sensor reading?
See, that is the ultimate trade-off of this architecture. It forces a localized collapse because it prioritizes absolute deterministic replayability over flexibility.
So it's just blindly deleting data that doesn't fit its ideal.
Yes, it ruthlessly deletes the anomaly, whether it is an error or just a weird true reading. But that strict mathematical gating is what guarantees the system operates perfectly and predictably every single time. It literally does not allow the physical space to hold a variable it wasn't programmed to expect.
Wow. Well, if the system is that ruthless at pruning single bits of unexpected data, it makes perfect sense how it handles a massive physical anomaly.
Right.
Like, that swarm of autonomous drones we talked about earlier.
Exactly. Just look at Project Geodesic Shield. Right now, traditional radio frequency jamming is failing against modern drone swarms because they are AI-driven and radio silent.
Right. They don't need a remote control to talk to a home base.
Yeah.
So jamming empty air does absolutely nothing. You can't jam a signal that isn't there.
Exactly. So the Department of Defense is running a 90-day pilot program using the Shield's 4D geometric tracking. Because they can manipulate that predictive geometry we just talked about, operators don't need to fire live weapons.
They just, alter the local gravity?
Yeah, they alter local gravity or atmospheric drag right in their flight path. It safely neutralizes the physical threat by building an invisible barricade out of spacetime, all without emitting a single radio frequency.
That is incredible. And to connect this back to you, the listener, if you are planning on heading to the 2026 World Cup, you might actually see this in action. You won't see anti-aircraft guns on the stadium roofs.
No, definitely not.
Instead, the civilian airspace itself will be mathematically locked down using this exact same non-emissive geometry-first tracking.
Ultimately, the geodesic shield uses geometry and curvature to engineer absolute deterministic order. It strips random chaos out of the environment entirely to create perfect, unbreakable systemic stability.
So it's taking that volume dial of spacetime, turning the unpredictability all the way down to 0, and just cranking the order up to 10.
Exactly.
But it leaves you with a pretty massive question to mull over. If the geodesic shield perfectly eliminates all random error and forces absolute mathematical alignment well, what happens to organic innovation or natural unpredictability within those flawlessly shielded environments?
That is the big question.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, can anything truly new grow in a system where the rules of reality are programmed to be perfectly predictable?